lives here with me. When we both go to leave the apartment, it's a lot of barking, jumping, almost trying to bite.
Do you have his remote handy?
Yeah, it's in the pocket.
No.
And then if like we're both in the bathroom getting ready, it's a lot of barking, and like he doesn't stop. I mean, with the collar on, it's a lot better. But when we're both going to leave, I don't want to have the collar on him when we're leaving for work.
Sure.
You know. We did have a biting incident. He got one of like the plastic squeaky toys out of a toy. I wasn't in the room when it happened. My sister had friends over. I told them to like let it be. They didn't listen, tried to get it out of his mouth, and the chance snapped.
Okay.
So that's another issue.
They tried to get it out of his mouth, you said?
Yeah, so
like
I told him to leave it.
Your sister did or somebody else did?
Her friend.
Okay. I gotcha.
And a lot of like resource guarding with like bones, so we don't really keep bones in the house at all. Just so I know he gets very protective over them.
Sure. Okay.
So mostly just those things.
So, as far as the barking is concerned, when you were saying like when you're getting ready to leave, is he barking like at you guys? Like what is he? Okay, I got you. And okay, so biggest problems: barking when you're getting ready to leave the house.
And like when we're walking out the door, if like
when you're walking out the door,
someone hugs me, it's like jumping up or.
Yep. So just arousal issues.
Yeah.
We'll call that, right? A little bit of resource guarding over bones. The squeaky toy incident is not really a him problem, right? I'll tell you, if anybody aside from like me or my wife or like somebody my dogs know really, really, really well went and tried to like physically take something out of their mouth, they'd probably try to bite him too, right? That's one of those things where like we could improve on his tolerance to things and we could improve on the resource guarding and stuff like that, but we can only expect our dogs to maintain their composure around like reasonable amounts of stress or distractions, right? And you know, somebody that they don't know super well, right, going and like physically trying to like take like that's so intrusive, man. You know,
and like I knew something. I had a feeling it was gonna happen. That's why I asked him not to try to get it out of his mouth. And like obviously I don't want anyone getting bit by my dog and being scared of my dog ever happening. And it wasn't like it was bad. His hand was swollen for a few days. It was nasty. But I just like don't want that happening again. Obviously like he knows, everyone that was here knows now. You know, it's just a very upsetting situation. Of course. I wasn't in the room.
I understand. You know, and it's, you know, it sucks because like you're saying, like it's bad. Like we don't want to say it's good, right? Like it's not like it's good. It's not like I want to like accept it and be like, oh, it's just going to happen kind of thing. But, you know, if we're going to start holding him to a higher standard with things, part of our job as like responsible dog owners is ensuring that certain things don't happen. You know what I mean? And that's definitely one of those things you just gotta be on top of and making sure that, you know, whether it's if people aren't going to like listen to you with that kind of stuff, like if you're not around, like he goes with you or he goes in another room or something like that, you know. But that's a big one with that, you know, because no amount of training is going to ensure that that's not going to happen if in those types of situations, you know. So, you know, like I said, we'll improve on, you know, there's things we could do to get better with those types of things, but that's a big one I like to tell everybody because that stuff is very important. Okay, so we'll kind of go, you know, and outside of those things, is there anything else major? Like how's he out on the, do you walk him a lot? I mean, how's he out on the walk? On a leash. Fine. I take him like to dog foley, obviously there's a lot of dogs at the bars there. He doesn't like dogs coming up to his face. But other than that, he's pretty fine. I mean, he was over there during the weekend. He was pretty good. No, that's pretty much it then. We still have a little car anxiety, but he's not as bad as he used to be for sure. He's pretty good about the car. And when you say you still have a little bit of it, what is he doing still? When we like get somewhere in park, he starts whining and like getting really excited. He'll like walk back and forth between the windows in the back, but yeah, I mean a little bit of excitement and stuff when you get somewhere is fairly normal. You know, if it hits a point where it's really extreme, you can give a correction to get him to settle down a little bit, obviously. Or use a command like a sit or down or something like that in the back seat and enforce that just to get him to quit like pacing around and moving so much. That's something else you could look at, obviously. Okay, so as far as the barking and stuff is concerned, so obviously, you know, we don't want you having the e-collar on the whole time when you're not here, obviously. Like that's kind of counterintuitive, obviously. Chill, bro. But one thing you could start doing is just proactively setting up that scenario to address the problem. Now, I didn't hear him. Is it only if you're like leaving? Because like right there, he seemed fine. Yeah, obviously, as we were coming up.
Today. He's just very.
Yeah.
Usually, it's like when we're getting ready to go to work. I don't know if it's just it's like earlier.
Yeah.
Usually it's later on. I wasn't asked if like crating him while I'm gone is something you would recommend. Maybe to.
Well,
that because I don't crate him. Honestly, he just like hangs out in the living room when I'm gone.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm a proponent of crates, obviously. I don't know if that'll directly solve your problem, because really this is just a matter of us starting to interrupt that headspace, And yeah, I mean, dogs are good at sensing like patterns as far as like if you're actually leaving, he could tell like there's something different typically going on versus like we're just walking out of the door for a couple minutes then back in, So again, we don't want to have him wear the collar all the time, but a couple things that you could do is one, you could keep the collar on for the whole time you're getting ready so that you can get really firm on the corrections for the barking and stuff like that in those situations to chill him out, and set that tone. And then right before you actually leave the house, you would then take it off, right? And a lot of times if you kind of stop it right there and don't let it escalate to that point where he's completely freaking out when you're walking out of the door, that's going to help you quite a bit. If for whatever reason he starts getting the pattern of that, what you could do is just for a couple of days, leave it on when you leave the house, and it's not gonna be the end of the world if like for 2 or 3 days he wears it while you're at work, obviously, and then you come home and then you give him a break with it off, obviously, so you can correct for it. But you gotta start setting up that pattern and like reshifting that kind of cycle that he's going through with things, right? I think that if he's freaking out when you're even getting ready and stuff like that, I think just addressing it right there, like really I think addressing it right there really strictly is going to be more than enough for something like that,
Sometimes even like if I'm off one day, my sister's getting ready in her room, when she tries to even leave, it's a problem. And like it's an issue, like I have to go and like get him out of her room. But you should, this is where when I look at situations like this, like that's just like ineffective use of our training. You know what I mean? Like you have communication on him to be able to tell him, you gotta knock that off, right? So my question is, are you using it? Or if you're using it, what are you doing where it's not working? You know what I mean? Yeah. There are definitely times, like, I don't have the collar on him, honestly, at all. Like, most of these interactions are when he doesn't have it on. There are some times where he does have the collar on, but a lot of times it's, like, honestly being inconsistent with the collar, like, wearing it.
Sure.
But.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, and we don't want to, we don't want to have him wear it all the time, obviously, right? But the way that I look at like long-term use of the collar is a couple of different things, right? So I have my 3 places that I'll always use it no matter what. Like this is what I do with my dogs, right? So people coming over, if we're going anywhere public, so basically anywhere outside of the house, right? Or if we're going off leash anywhere, right? Those 3 scenarios, 100% of the time, forever, for the rest of eternity, I'm always gonna put the e-collar on my dogs, right? That sets me up for success where I know that, under 9 out of 10 circumstances, if they're gonna blow me off, it's gonna be in one of those situations and I'll never get caught off guard, right? People coming over, if he starts jumping, I can correct that literally immediately, right? If he starts excessively barking at something, right? I could stop that immediately. If I'm out on a walk and he sees another dog and he starts pulling towards it or starting to react, I could stop that immediately, et cetera, right? So that baseline sets the tone under like all states of mind that the dog could be like really amped up, that like that stuff just doesn't fly right now. It's not gonna work, right? Outside of those 3 situations, usually what I'll do is I'll start to recognize if there's patterns that I'm noticing with my dogs where they're starting to do something incorrect, right? So one good example is, my one dog will once every like 4 or 5 months start getting really slow with coming in from the backyard, right? We've got a big fence in backyard, so like I don't really put the e-collar on when I let him out there typically, but every now and then I'll notice she'll start just like lollygagging back there, and like I'll tell her come, and she's just kind of like, screw you, I don't want to, right? So if I start noticing that become like a reoccurring thing where that's happening more than just a couple of times, I'll spend 5 days, I usually set myself like a 5-day window for this kind of stuff, where every single time I let her out in the backyard, I put the e-collar on. Right? That way, first time I give that come command, she doesn't do it, boom, I can give a big correction for that. And I can do that for 5 days straight, which resets everything, sets that tone of what's expected back there, and then I can fade it back out in that situation, right? So I would be looking at this situation like that, right? Leaving the house, right? Whether it's you leaving the house, did you say your roommate, your sister? Your sister leaving the house, both of you guys leaving the house, whatever it may be, if one of you is gonna be leaving the house, collar goes on him, e-collar set up really high so that the second he starts rehearsing that behavior, we can nip it in the butt, right? We do that for 5 days. and we see a massive reduction in that behavior, then we start fading that collar back out.
Got it.
Right? And then if 4 months from now I start noticing it come back a little bit, same deal. 5 days, put the e-collar on, level set high, ready to nip it in the butt the second it starts, then we fade it out again. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that you can do right away with that, right? Second thing is when he does have the collar on, just other observations, I want you to take advantage of the fact that he has it on. So for example, right, kind of jumping on me and Paige when we were coming in. He wasn't necessarily putting his paws up on us, but he was definitely jumping up, right? And he had the e-collar on and you weren't correcting for it or anything, right? So I want you to start looking at the things that, like, you know, you deem as like, this is something I don't want him to do. And I want you making sure, okay, we got the collar on, we can do something about this, right? Because every time that you let things slide like that, and it's like, all right, well, you know, we'll let it, it's really not that bad here. And like, oh, well, it's David, he'll probably handle it or whatever it may be. He starts looking at you less and less and less like the person that's in charge. You know what I mean? So you got to take full advantage of those types of situations, right? So that's a lot of this, is really positioning ourselves and setting ourselves up for success with these types of things, right? Because obviously, you know, if we go into scenarios just like, he'll be fine, or fingers crossed, I hope he's fine, we're always going to get caught off guard with stuff, right? So as far as your barking stuff is concerned, does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So like 5 days, super consistent, nice and high on the level, just nip it in the butt, right? There's no reason for him to be rehearsing that behavior, right? Okay. Second thing, obviously, resources, toys, things like that. How is he with, like, how is it, like, will he drop toys for you and like release them and stuff like that?
If he's wearing the collar, he's better about it. Without the collar, he typically doesn't listen to like a drop command.
So similar concept is what we just talked about here, right? When I hear people tell me that like the dog listens really good when the collar's on, but listens like shit when it's off, basically, that's a telltale sign that we rushed too quickly into having it off, right? So basically what we're looking for is not necessarily that like he's just like perfect all the time with or without the collar.
Is he looking at his paws or a toy? His paws.
His paws. Cut it out, dude.
Allergies.
I know, those real light-skinned dogs, you know. No. He's like, oh, sorry. Things like that too, like you can correct for those types of things, you know. Set that tone again. Something we don't want him to do. You gotta knock it off, right? So. Yeah, the goal as far as getting to a place where the dog is compliant without the e-collar is basically we need to make these behaviors 100% like habitual, right? Meaning like he doesn't even, like he's so good at performing the behavior correctly that he forgets he even has the e-collar on, right? So in order to get to that point, we need to essentially hit a point where he's 100% reliable with whatever we're working on with that collar on, and he's been 100% reliable with whatever that behavior is for X amount of time until it's become a habit for him. From there, we could start fading it out, right? So again, I think in a lot of cases, most people will try too often where it's like sometimes we ask him to drop something when the collar is on, sometimes we ask him to drop it when the collar is not on, and he starts realizing immediately that 50% of the time he can get away with it, right? And since dogs are opportunists, and because obviously it's more reinforcing for him to chew the bone than for him to just, you know, listen to you for no incentive, you know, what we're gonna find is that he's gonna continue testing that boundary with things, right? So same concept, right? You wanna start taking advantage of situations when the collar is on and asking him to release those things. So let's say let's say right there he was chewing on that bone, right? And we got the collar on right now, and you know, it doesn't matter. I don't care if he chews that bone or not over there, but I wanna test, right? Can I get him to release this thing or not, right? I'm gonna give a drop command. If he doesn't listen to that drop command, again, I'm going to give a high correction for that, right? And then, great, if he releases it, okay, cool, we're done. You can have it back again and you're good to go, right? And then what I do is maybe the next day, whenever the collar is on, whenever he's hanging out chewing a bone or something like that, I test it again, right? And then, again, the next day, when he has the collar on, he's chewing the bone, I test it again. And I practice that repeatedly over and over again until we hit a point where he just is consistent about releasing it, because the expectation is 100% consistent, right? And then in situations where he doesn't have the collar on, I just try to at all costs avoid even asking it, right? Because again, it's worse to try to give a command when we're not in a position to enforce it and have him blow us off than to just let him have it and let him rehearse it and us just not ask anything in the first place, right? So same deal when it comes to, you know, guarding objects and stuff like that. Typically that's an issue with the dog not releasing those objects, which means that we need to get much more firm on him over that, right? So that's obviously another thing that I would look at right away with things. Let's do this. Why don't you, I just want to see how he listens to you here. Why don't you walk over there and give him a bed command. Let's see how he listens to it.
Chance, bed.
Pretty good. Now, would you say that that is better or about the same as what it usually is? As far as responsiveness. It's usually pretty good with that. Perfect, right? Now, he's gotten 2 corrections already today, right? He got 1 for trying to jump. He got 1 for licking his paws over there, right? So already you could tell after those 2 corrections, like he's in a pretty, all right, I get the game right now. We're in a focused in headspace, right? And we've kind of set the tone of what's expected in this moment. So I don't really think we're going to get a whole lot of nonsense out of him right now.
Right.
But that's kind of the key with this kind of stuff is if we set the tone, right? And we show him what's expected, like before people even come in and stuff like that, 9 out of 10 times the dog never rehearses the poor behavior in the first place because they know it's just not going to fly. You know what I mean? So that's why one of my routines anytime I have guests come over is I use the bed stay for the first like 15 minutes that they're there before I let them hang out and interact and stuff like that. Now, do you use your bed stay with guests over and stuff or no?
Sometimes.
Sometimes?
Depends, yeah.
Okay.
When there's a lot of people over here, it's not always, but if there's a couple of us just like hanging out, he's pretty good about just like keeping to himself.
And when there's a lot of people, do you not use it because he's not as responsive to it, or?
I think a lot more people a lot of my friends like to like play with him, and I think he gets more excited when there's more people in the room. Sure. And so I just don't really think of it.
Understood.
They're like, oh, they're playing with him, wearing him out.
Yeah.
He's having fun. You know what I mean?
Understood. So that's good. Listen, I'm glad that he likes most of your friends and stuff like that. The problem is that right now, right, we're not creating enough direction with him in those situations so that when he likes it, is really excited and really amped up and stuff like that, and he's burning off energy, and hell yeah, it's great, everybody's having a good time. But he's also determining when he doesn't like something that he could also react accordingly and communicate those boundaries to people, right? Dogs are creatures of habit, right? Meaning that if we could create a routine that we set and just stay with like indefinitely forever with things, it's going to be 10 times easier for them to be successful with it because it's very predictable for them, right? So again, the bed stay when people come over, it's not that he has to do it the entire time people are here. That's not the goal, obviously, right? The goal is just first 10 minutes that people come over the house, we immediately create structure around a high arousing trigger, right? So again, then also getting back to anytime people come over is a place I will 100% of the time put the e-collar on my dog. That's a routine that I want you to set with him, right? So people are coming over, knock, knock, somebody's here. Before you ever let anybody in, just put him on the bed. Again, have your level set high enough where you know he's going to care more about it than the people and stuff, and let them in, right? And then just set an initial boundary of, guys, when he's on the bed, you gotta just leave him be, right? Just leave him be for 5. I don't care if they're like, oh, Chance, you look so cute over there, you know? But they can't go approach him, right? Because that again gets into that's a little bit unfair for him at that point, right? But we have to set that routine initially where we give him a chance to just not let that arousal hit this like level 15, like I'm so freaking pumped up that people are here kind of thing, you know what I mean? And then once we go to release him, he's gonna be that much calmer and it's gonna be that much more controlled. Again, we set the tone of things to get him into that good compliant state of mind, right? So that's one thing to do right off the rip there. Another thing I would be aware of, I know, so that incident you had with the squeaker toy, granted that was a very clear trigger, you know, we know exactly why he did that. But one thing to keep in mind is, I don't know how often you have a lot of people come over, you know, I don't know how often there's gonna be like, you know, a lot of stuff going on, but you have to, sometimes the more people are there, the more important it is to give him breaks. Either with our bed stay or just like putting him into another room or something, right? Because again, that much stuff going on, that much chaos, like it could be a lot for dogs and they could really love it at first, but once they hit that point where it's like overwhelming and like there's so much going on and everybody's smothering me and I'm just so stimulated and like I'm getting anxious and this and that, that's where like 99% of the time people call me and say, hey, somebody got bit, there was a dog fight, this, that. It's always in one of those types of situations situations where the dog was just in this high stress environment for just too long. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind, obviously, as well with this kind of stuff. Obviously, he's doing great with holding that bed. That looks really good. So why don't you go ahead and release him here? You can let him up.
Okay. No. Chance, come.
Cool. Looks pretty good. Why don't you see if grab one of his toys that you think he really likes and see if you could like get him to engage with it or something. He's like, okay, sure. And just let him play with it for a minute here. And then in a couple seconds here, what you're going to do is you're going to tell him drop just one time. Give him a second to do it. If he doesn't do it, tell him no for it.
Okay. Chance, drop it. No.
Now give it back to him and start playing again. He's like, no thanks.
Come on. No? Here. No?
And this is pretty normal first time, obviously. If we give a correction for it, they're just going to be uninterested initially. If he doesn't want it, totally fine. Again, try again, and you could try it again later today. You could try it again the next day, something like that. But we have to get him faster with that release for sure.
Right. No? Nothing?
He's like, I don't know what's going on right now. All right, you gotta put that back for a second here. And why don't you go ahead and put him back on the bed?
Okay. Chance, bed.
Perfect. I think 99% of the issues that you're seeing right now are probably that you've gotten a little too lax with just like, we did the training and now we're kind of past the training. You know what I mean? As opposed to figuring out, I think the key with a lot of this stuff is figuring out how do I incorporate the training just into my life forever, where it never totally goes away, right? But at the same time, it doesn't take me like hours and hours of like time in order to do, you know what I mean? And that's why, like I said, I've really created for myself, because listen, like I can get lazy with this stuff too, trust me. Like there's definitely times where I'm like, I slack off on things, I let things slide here, this, that, right? Like I'm a human just like everybody else. But I set those 3 routines as far as the places that I'll always enforce my training in, because if I enforce it in those 3 situations, one, those 3 situations don't happen that often. It's not like I'm having people come over the house all the time, right? It's not like we're going off leash all the time places, and it's not like we're going to public places all the time, right? But in those situations, I'm always on top of my training. I'm always looking for opportunities to work my training, whether it's with a bed stay when a guest comes over, whether it's working my recalls when I'm working off leash stuff, whether it's we go to a public place and I'm working on my healing and my downstay. You know what I mean? Where at least a couple of times a week, I'm getting a good opportunity to get some training practice in. Right. You know what I mean? And if you could do that, it doesn't really matter what's going on when you're just here with him, because I'm assuming his behavior is probably 10 times better in those scenarios than it is anywhere else. Right. You know what I mean? So you don't have to be doing all of this training in those scenarios. But man, those big scenarios, that's where people get themselves into trouble with this kind of stuff. Yeah. You know? So that's where it's going to be really important to work this stuff. I mean, I'm all in all not seeing anything at all that's like standing out to me like, oh, this is something we need to work on. Because this is not a teaching problem at this point. This is you being a little bit more strategic about where you're using your training problem. Right. You know what I mean? And I think clarifying in your mind some places where you always use the e-collar, you know, and, you know, set some new structure, particularly with guests coming over. Another thing too, if guests are coming over, you really should just put the toys away if he has resource guarding issues, you know? Yeah. That's another thing that's very key, you know? Just because, again, you know, like, you could be as diligent as you want about stuff. You could be as super on top of like, hey, don't touch him if he's got this or whatever, but it's like, just eliminating that problem from happening in the first place sometimes can be just as effective, if not more effective with things, you know? But I think all in all, again, spending like 5 days or so, anytime you're leaving the house, getting really firm with your corrections for that. Okay. Tightening up your walk by being looser on the leash and giving a correction where you're giving a leash tug instead. Okay. Always using your e-collar when guests come over, if you go anywhere public or if you go off leash anywhere. and then routine of bed stay when guests are coming over, and putting toys away when guests come over, and working your drop command. I know that sounds like a lot, but like it's really just some new structure to the things you're already doing with him, you know? And I think if you enforce those couple of things, I think you're gonna be good to go with this. Good. Pete, come. Down. Down. Good.
They're good. She's been pretty distracted lately.
Okay.
So just sniffing everything. I noticed too, as soon as we get back to like kind of the route that we always take, she chills out of it.
Yeah.
It's like anytime we go to a new spot, she's just like sniff, sniff, sniff.
He's pretty good as long as I have the clicker.
Yep.
Like,
Same. Like whenever I didn't have it functioning right,
Yeah.
it was like I would say no, and she would like look at me and just like keep pulling.
Yep.
and usually it's just like one buzz, and then
Yeah.
he's fine for the rest.
Yep, and that's typically pretty common as far as what you'll see. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind with all this kind of stuff, you know, behavior in general is contingent on reinforcement, right? Whether that's obviously e-collar, right, and us giving corrections, whether that's we're using food and reinforcing something, everything is contingent on reinforcement. So if you take any of that reinforcement away preemptively before the dogs have really created this like habitual response to just listening to you guys, you're gonna see it all fall apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is why we usually say like that first month or so, it's just so important just to stay super diligent on things, you know, and expect them to make the mistakes so that you can correct for them. And, you know, then in her case, right, if the collar is functioning, obviously I know you've had some issues with just the equipment working, obviously, but when it is working, you know, if you go on that new walk and she's just like, no, I'm distracted, I'd rather do this, you have to make sure, obviously, one, you're persistent about things, and two, your motivation is appropriate, where she cares more about it than trying to do that thing, right? Because all that is, excuse me, is the husky and her testing that boundary, right? You're like, well, like that correction wasn't that bad. Let me keep trying to sniff here, right? So we got to make sure that she obviously cares more about that than whatever it is that she's trying to do, you know? So that's really the key with it. And then, you know, a constant conversation I'm having with clients is just not rushing too quickly into the state of mind of like, okay, they're trained, so we just like, just do it. You know what I mean? It's you're constantly training when you go in those situations, right? Walking, for example, there's never going to be a time you go for walks and don't use the e-collar. You know what I mean? Like when I take my dogs for walks, I still use the e-collar to this day with them, you know? And I don't really need to use it that much. And there's definitely been times I have taken them without the e-collar and they're fine, but that's because I'm 99% of the time so consistent about that, you know, that like they know what the expectation is on the walk. They don't really test that boundary, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
90 days from before.
Yeah, no, good to hear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just don't get too, you know, pushing the boundaries with things without the e-collar and stuff like that. Just really keep in mind, it's going to be a little while before they really got this. You know what I mean? And as long as you're consistent about that, then, you know, you'll see them continue to progress with it. And that's where you'll start seeing that they just get better and better with, you know, obviously listening whether or not they have the e-collars on. But even with my dogs, again, if they don't have their e-collars on, I try to just avoid asking them to do anything. Because we say I'm better off. Now, case in point right there, that's a good example of any time that once we put her in a position, right, if she makes that mistake, that should be a correction there. Because right there, we're starting to deteriorate things where before, like when I came to the house, for example, last time, right, and she held that bed stay perfectly, right, and maybe needed one correction for breaking it, but she was rock solid with it, right? The second we start falling into the trap of just reminding them as opposed to correcting when they make those mistakes, it ruins all that, where they start realizing that, oh, I could get up until mom tells me to get back into it. Right? So try to stay consistent about when you're given those commands, following through with that correction, right? If they don't listen to it. But yeah, I was saying, it's better to just not ask them to do anything and let them be a little wild than it is to ask them to do something when you're not in a position and enforce it and teach them to blow you off. Right? So keep that in mind, obviously. it's all about the environment, you know, it's all about how we socialize them. That's really what it comes down to. There's so many dogs out there, like some of the most social dogs you'll meet, that in the right recipe of things going on, like an issue will happen, you know? So it's all about setting them up for success with this kind of stuff and just being aware that they're animals, you know? This is, you know, stuff's gonna happen, and, you know, you just learn to understand your dog better and what they need to be successful with it.
When they were here, did they socialize with like more than one dog at a time, or did y'all?
We did small groups. I think I did like 2 or 3 at a time a couple times, but for the most part, there's not very many situations you guys are ever going to need to socialize them in like a large group, you know? So I try to focus on just really small controlled groups that are going to be like good fits for them.
Yeah. Well, it's like my sister has 3 dogs.
Yeah.
And then like a couple of our friends we get together, like we all have a dog, but then we're all there, so there's like a group of dogs.
Yeah, you just, I think we might have talked about this a little bit last time. You just got to be careful with those kind of situations. I tend to stay away from like the mass dog gatherings.
Yeah.
You know, like we got some friends, that same deal, like all of them have dogs and they all get together and it's like there's 6 dogs and like 12 people and like, you know, there's just so much happening and it's just typically not productive for anybody. And the risk of something happening in those situations is so much higher. I don't see it worth it, you know? That's a different story. Like I said, if you got one friend that's got a dog, they want to come over, socialize for a little bit or something, or, you know, in your sister's case with her little group and yours, you know, that's a different story. But I would probably be avoiding the big dog gatherings. And even that, for now, until you guys really start to trust him socially, I would, like, we're gonna, like, in the next like 3 or 4 minutes, like wrap this up anyways, you know? Keep them short and sweet, you know? Let them have some fun, end on a really productive note, you know? Because the other mistake a lot of people make is they go way too long. It's like they do it for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and then like, you know, he had a ton of fun, and then he just gets over it, right? And then he's over it, but the other dog keeps coming back, and it's like nobody's seeing it because like we're distracted at that point, and it's like, you know, then a problem happens, so.
Yeah, at the beach.
You know, there's ways to make that go successfully. Like once you guys get closer to whenever that's actually going to happen, we could talk about that. But, you know, house guests, like we, same deal, have some people that it's like a family member is going to stay with them for a week or something and they're bringing a dog with them. And I would say you just got to be, careful with it, because like if you take 2 dogs and you just add another dog into their life, right? That's just suddenly living with them and doing all of the same things and eating and meal times and nighttime. There's so many more variables that are very unnatural. Now, in a case like this, Sonny, no. Good. So sometimes what I'll do, like as I'm getting ready to end the social, is I'll test and make sure that I still have the attention where I need it. So right there I said Sonny, right? He was still doing what he was doing, so I gave a correction for that to make sure I can disengage him very, very quickly if I need to. And again, level-wise, that was a 75 that I just corrected at there. You see how much higher that is than what we normally work at, and how little of a response we got out of him, right? So be aware of that, and don't be shy, you know, with those higher levels in situations like this to set those tones.
Okay.
Looks good. Okay. They're doing great. A little bit more consistent on just holding them to a little higher of a standard. Commands look good though once we started cruising with them. And socialization, I would definitely recommend starting to try to socialize a little bit. Just 1 dog at a time, super short, 30 minutes or so, nice and productive, you know. Just get your guys' selves comfortable with doing it a little bit. And obviously just make sure you know the other dog. That's the key with it, is like that's a very social friendly dog, you know. So like I don't have anything to worry about with that dog, so I could really keep my attention on my dogs at that point, right?
Okay, so my dad has a dog. It's like
what determines friendly social dog?
They seem like it's an old dog.
Yeah.
There's like snaps at Sunday, but Sandy just ignores them.
Yeah.
They just ignore each other. But
yeah.
Occasionally we have my ex-wife's dog, which is a Chihuahua.
Sure.
Who, again, Sunny ignores them.
Yeah.
But the Chihuahua kind of
pushes her buttons.
Yep.
Pushes Kaya's buttons.
And she'll take it for a day or two, and then it turns into fights.
Okay, so generally speaking, right, my rule when it comes to socializing dogs is I will only ever put one, what I refer to as supervised dog, in a group at a time, right? Meaning Sonny in my eyes is the supervised dog, right? He's fine, right? But again, under the right circumstances could present a problem, right? Kaya's fine. She would be a social dog in my mind, right? Luna, social dog in my mind. Social to me means under 99% of circumstances, there's not going to be a problem with this dog. Again, they're animals. There can be a problem at some point, but under 99% of situations, there's not going to be a problem, right? So knowing that, knowing the other dog is a supervised dog also, right? At least with the Chihuahua, it sounds like. I personally would not put Kaya in that dog, Sonny and that dog together, right? Because again, like if that dog's getting crotchety towards him and then he decides he has a problem with that because he has a history of having issues, right? That can turn into a bad situation, right? I caveat all of that with, you know your dogs. You know those dogs better than me, right? So you have to use your best judgment with that kind of stuff. Regardless if you're going to socialize them, though, everything comes down to the environment in which we're socializing them in, right? Especially when it comes to little dogs and stuff like that. So many times they're all over the furniture, they're in your lap, they're here, they're there, and it makes them 10 times more likely to react and stuff, where if you just nix all of that stuff when they're socializing, usually that dog is 10 times better, right? So, you know, use your best judgment with it, right? I play, like when it comes to socialization and stuff, I play it really safe with that kind of stuff, you know? But I'm understanding that sometimes you have a family member that has a dog, and it's like, we got to get these two dogs to get along and stuff, and you just supervise it a little extra closely at that point, you know? So, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, Sonny totally.
One issue, it was yesterday, she ran away a little bit.
A little bit?
It was not great.
What happened?
So a friend came to the door and she was inside, and usually she just waits. It's a new house, like we just moved in. So usually she waits a little bit further back, but instead like came right up to the person to greet, didn't jump or anything, and then saw the entry and just booked it.
Sick.
And as like came outside, I was like, Pearl, come, you know, and she looked at me, and then like the whites of her eyes showed, and she just like sprinted.
Where'd she go?
She went down the street. It was a one-way, thank God, up to some lady, these guys, and I'm like, grab her, and she just like kept, and then she squatted to pee, and that's when I got her. But it wasn't, you know, like ideal.
No, yeah. See if we can avoid that, obviously.
I'm gonna hear about this, Pearl.
That's right.
Other than that, she's been really good.
Cool. I'm assuming she didn't have her e-collar on.
No.
That's fine. I mean, it's understandable, obviously. So.
We're just relaxing in the house.
Yeah. You said somebody was coming over or something? You had a guest coming over?
Yes.
Okay. So one big thing I've had, this is the third time I've had this conversation today. How are you, Scott? I always make sure that there's 3 situations my dogs always have e-collars on it.
Okay.
Right. So anytime we're going off leash anywhere, obviously, right? Anytime we're going to like a public place, so basically anywhere outside of the house, and anytime I have guests over the house, right? Because guests coming over the house, there's just so many wrenches that can be thrown into things as far as like, you know, like suddenly the door's open, arousal levels are up, you know, they're doing something weird that's getting her all amped up. Like it could be any number of things that could happen. And I know that in those 3 scenarios, those are the places that if my dogs are going to blow me off, they're going to blow me off in one of those 3 situations, you know?
You betrayed me.
So,
okay.
So by having it on in those situations, that kind of protects you from the situations where like guests are coming in and suddenly she's like, oh, I feel like taking off or whatever, right? Second thing that's going to help with that, and this is going to be something we're going to work on today with the e-collar, is obviously our bed stay.
Okay.
I try to use a bed stay when I have guests come over the house initially, like as they're coming in. Okay. So first like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, so the guest comes over, get her situated over there, make sure she's practicing some impulse control while they're coming in, they can get themselves situated and stuff. Then we obviously go about releasing her, and then she's free and everything's good.
Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. You could do that. A good adjustment. I just like the joy in her eyes.
Oh yeah.
Like Queso would have never done
It's like the funnest thing in the world to them, you know?
Oh my God, she was like a later loser.
First got her, like literally 2 weeks after we got her, we accidentally left our side gate open in our backyard, and they were out back for like 20 minutes, and then I opened the front door to grab something out of the driveway. Queso was standing in the driveway just staring at me.
She knows how good she has it. She would never leave. But Pearl was like 3 yards over. See you later.
You know what's funny is like I always tell everybody, like, I feel like I could relate to my clients so much because I've experienced pretty much every issue possible with my dogs. And with Vera, when I first got her, this is like just got a dog, right? Never owned a dog in my life before. Didn't know anything about them. And we're hanging out at my parents' house, and they got like whatever, like an acre, and it's like fenced in, and like we're just hanging out. We're out there for a couple hours, and didn't think anything of it. They got like a little section of woods that's fenced in and stuff like that. And suddenly my phone rings. This number I don't know, and I'm just like, I almost just like ignored it. I was like, well, I don't know who this is, right? I didn't have a business where people would be calling me and stuff like that I didn't know. And I picked it up, and they're like, hi, do you have like a black pit bull mix? And I was like, yeah, like what? And he's like, I have her right now. And I was just like, oh shit, right? So he was at the gas station like 2 houses next door, and like I'm like, oh my god, I like go like sprinting out, and like I go over, and she's just sitting there just like happy as can be, just like, oh, there's this like new person that I'm hanging out with, and he's like, here you go. And I'm like, thanks.
You know? I don't even know her yet. Like,
yeah, like literally I had her for like a couple weeks at that point, I think.
No, she hasn't been destructive, and we've been out a lot. We've been to the dog beach. Like the recall seems to be going really well.
Good.
Good on the long lead.
Yeah.
So I think other than.
Have you done it fully off leash at all? No. That's fine.
Well, I mean, yes, at the dog.
Take your time with it, obviously.
Yeah, the dog beach, yes, with queso. But that's it, like twice. But I think if we were like in a grassy area, absolutely not.
Yeah, you know, work at your own comfort level with that is what I tell everybody. There's no rush to get to full off leash. Do it on the long line until it feels like stupid that you're even putting that long line on.
Okay.
So why don't you go ahead and take your leash off altogether. I'm going to start off just doing a couple of come commands. If that looks good, like I said, we're going to jump right into the bed stays here. Pearl, come. Wrong person. I usually recommend like practice, obviously before the guests are there, like in your training sessions and stuff you do, and make it as challenging as possible. You know, like if you know you guys just walking to the front door and opening it up is like enough of a trigger, work that picture a lot of times. If the doorbell going off or knocking on the door is a big trigger, work that a lot of times, you know, and get most of it out of the way before the person is ever even there, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
She did well with that. So I want to see you guys start working that bed stay inside of the house. Now here's the key with this. So initially, obviously just getting into the bed, little bits of duration is important and stuff. After a couple of days, if she's doing good with just getting onto the bed, start really pushing the duration to like 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
So put her on, have her hold it 20 to 30 minutes. Anytime she steps off, correct her, take her back.
Okay.
Right. And that should be your big target goal is distractions and then duration. Okay. So the amount of time holding it.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so this looks really good. So one note here. So obviously last time when he was going bananas at me when he came out and I took the e-collar, I corrected on 100 for that, obviously. Now, the trap I could see people fall into sometimes is, I'm assuming he's been better for you at home with a lot of things, right? Which is great, right? Tell him no. Tap the button. And then tell him sit again. Sit. Now, what was that at right there?
16.
Oh, that was 16. Okay, so you turned down pretty good. So, the trap people can fall into with this kind of stuff is because the dog is doing a lot better, it's like we almost can kind of get it in our mind that he won't go as bananas as he did that last time, this time.
Him to go bananas.
But here's the thing, last time when he went that bananas, 100 was what it took to stop the behavior, you know what I mean? So if we were at, you said 60 or 40 or something like that, 40, right? 40 ain't gonna do shit in that moment, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, and if he's just in this state of mind, yeah, 40 is more than enough for that, right? But I would go into this scenario with the expectation that maybe it's going to be that bad, and I want to make sure that I'm not going to get caught off guard and lose that opportunity to correct it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So just keep that in mind. I'm not telling you have to be super high, but you should always prepare for the worst with this kind of stuff and hope for the best, as opposed to the other way around, so you're prepared. Preparation is everything for this kind of stuff. And then worst case scenario, like I said, like right now, he was pretty good. That was really good, all things considered, right? But again, you know, so if we say we had it at 100 at the ready and he just made that mistake right there, yeah, I would just turn down and then tap it like you did right there, you know. But it's a lot harder when they're freaking out to remember, like, oh wait, I gotta scramble and turn it up, than the other way around. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah, as soon as we turn down that like industrial side,
104.
Squeaks. More.
We got here a little early.
Buddy.
So I walked him a little bit.
Yeah.
He was just getting it all out.
So what's been the word lately? How's he been?
He's been pretty good. There have been a couple times, so we've been doing like the sits, with the leash, dropping it, and working in the beds. And there was just a couple times where on the bed, instead of he sat right in front of it, so corrected him. But
sure.
I mean, typically he's been good with that.
We haven't done many people.
Yeah, I haven't really had an opportunity to work it yet.
Yeah.
So when we do the sits and the beds, there's typically like two places he likes to sit. So one time I just had him in the kitchen. He was on my right-hand side. I told him to. He walked to my left, and there's like a kitchen mat by the sink that he always sits on.
Sure.
So we had him doing it there. And the one time his mom, or her mom came over, and he was excited to be. I didn't have e-collar or anything ready. She just popped in, was dropping some stuff off.
Sure.
He
And
likes her.
I had him, So he was so excited though, but I kind of down in front of him, I said, try to get him to sit at least, and he went to that mat there. Yeah. He sat there, and then, you know, he was so excited, but then when I said, give him his okay.
Yep.
And, you know, I got out of the way, and he went to go see her.
Good. Totally fine. So a couple things with that. So one, I would say that if you don't have the e-collar on, just don't even try to ask him to do anything, because you're going to do more harm by asking him to do something and him blowing you off than by just letting him be excited, you know? Thing two, when people are coming over, regardless of who it is, try to just put it on. Obviously, we weren't really at that point yet, but moving forward, just have it on at the ready for those things. And then last thing, if I just tell him sit, I don't care where he sits. If he's more comfortable sitting on that thing, as long as it's not like I put him in a sit right here and he was in that sit and then he's like, I'd rather go over there. Unless it's that situation, if I just tell him sit and he walks over there and sits down, I have no problem with that.
That's why I was like, oh, at least try to keep it consistent. Sure. Putting him on that mat.
Well, that's where we're going to get into the bed command, obviously. You could use whatever you want for it, like, you know, whether it's a dog bed or some people will use like a mat or something like that for it. You got hiccups there, dude?
Is that what that is?
Maybe. I don't know. Keep an eye on it.
I'm